A Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Tim here from Sapphire Running Zone. Today we're launching the first of our new podcast series on training support, and what better place to start than the long run. Such an important aspect obviously of everyone's training, particularly if you're doing a distance event like a half marathon or a marathon. And the way I always look at the long run is thinking of it as a mini event. It's almost a practice for race day itself, and everything that we'll talk about throughout this podcast is very much focused on using it as a warm-up in effect. Every single race that I've done, every single distance event that I've run in the past has been 100% dictated. Its success has been dictated by how that long run went during my training. So did I have a good series of long runs that culminated in one that was 80-90% of where I wanted to be on race day? So if it's a marathon, most I would probably do is about 20 miles. If I got to that point and it all went well and it built up gradually, the chances are that marathon itself would go really well, or the half marathon would go really well. If I didn't have a good series of long runs, then I'd say it was fairly inevitable that it wasn't going to go well on race day. So my very first marathon, the longest run I ever did, was 13 miles, which clearly isn't enough. And I struggled off the back of that. And I vowed when I went over that finish line in a pretty bad state that I would never, ever do that again. Now, inevitably, I had plenty of races that didn't go that well for various reasons. But most of the time, I had allowed my training to be 100% focused on that long run. And everything you do really on your training plan is focused around preparing yourself for the long run, which inevitably for most people ends up being at the weekend. Might not always be. If you've got a work pattern that's not conducive to that, then it's fine doing it on a Wednesday or a Thursday or whenever it is. But the 2 or 3 runs that you do during the week build up to that long run. So when your long run gets to its maximum, which is probably going to be 18 to 20 miles for most people, chances are your midweek runs will be at about 8 to 10 miles to build your legs up, to get your heart and lungs ready for that long run at the weekend. So the more of these sort of build-up runs that you do during the week, in terms of distance, the better you're going to be prepared for that long run. It's no good keeping your midweek runs at 2 or 3 miles because you're not really going to be able to make that step up to those longer runs. So timing is absolutely everything. What I always try and do is to do my long runs at the same time as the race itself. And that isn't always possible. And this just comes back again to this point about trying to treat them as a practice event, a warm-up event. So if your race starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, try and do your long runs at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's not always going to be practical, we know that, but just try and do that. There's been many, I prefer doing my runs in the evenings, but obviously with a long run, that's not always possible. But it's really, really important that you try and get your long run as close as possible to your race day start time, give or take. It doesn't have to be exact, but chances are your race is going to start in the morning. So try and do your long run in the morning. It's a big deal, the long run, obviously, because it takes as the runs get longer, they take more time. So you don't want to be doing these at 3 p.m. and worrying about it all day. And it might be a 3 or 4 hour run. You don't want to be coming back in at 6, 7 o'clock at night. This is a good chance to run in the day, in the daylight. So try and do it in the morning. You haven't got too much time faffing around in the morning then. Get it done, and then you'll have a bit of time to yourself in the evening. Important, obviously, that you focus on your nutrition. Nutrition is really, as we know, one of the key issues when it comes to a successful race day. And it's your nutrition that you're building up during the week and what happens on race day. And you should therefore take the same, you should have the same focus on your nutrition as you're planning for your long runs. So don't just think say your long runs on a Sunday, don't just think on a Saturday at 6 o'clock, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Plan it, because you know that the next day, in effect, you've got a race coming up on the Sunday. This is your long run. So think of it as you would for your race. So plan it. So think, right, okay, I know that I need to have a carbohydrate-based meal. So I'm going to plan it, and I'm going to have that at 4 or 5 o'clock on Saturday night. So you've got a chance to digest it all properly. And then in the morning, on Sunday morning, you're going to get up and you're going to have the same meal that you would have on race morning. And that might be, for most of us, it's probably going to be tea and toast, something like that. That's what you should have. That's what you should have all your long runs in the morning. Don't be thinking, right, I'll have a nice fry up now. Let me get the pan out and get the sausages and bacon on. That's not what you're going to do on race day. Well, I hope not. And therefore you wouldn't do it on your long run day. So be thinking all the time, how am I gonna fuel myself on this long run? Because as these get longer and longer, it's a serious issue. And if you haven't fueled up properly, then you are really going to struggle on as they get sort of north of 15 miles. The other aspect of nutrition, obviously, that you need to be thinking about is the famous gels. What are we going to do with gels? The carbohydrate gels. So complex carbohydrate does make a massive difference to your performance on these longer runs. How many are you going to take? When are you going to start taking those? So I would recommend you don't worry about those until you started hitting about 10 miles. On your long runs. And then you've got to be thinking, right, how many do I need? How practical is it when I'm carrying these things? So most of us, the best thing you can do is to grab one of these fuel belts. So you'll see a lot of people out with these. This is basically something that you strap around your waist, and you can carry water and the gels, because inevitably you are going to need water. And you will also need water to manage the gels, because you need to wash these gels down. They're not the easiest thing in the world to digest, consume. And basically what you should do is you should rip the tops off, put a little bit in your mouth, swallow it with a little bit of water. So be thinking, how am I going to take these gels with me? How much water am I going to need? And when am I going to use these gels? Ideally, you'd probably be looking at, if you're up to your 18, 20 mile long runs, you're probably looking at about 4, because that's probably how many you'll take on race day, maybe one more. And therefore you need to take some water with you to help you digest those. And of course, for general hydration, because when you're out for 3 or 4 hours, you are going to need plenty of water. How do you carry water for that distance? Well, a lot of people will take water with them, and a lot of people will put water around their long run course. That might mean just going out in the car the day before and putting it in some strategic locations on the way around, just a small bottle of water. One of the dangers of taking water with you is you can take too much and you end up carrying it. And rather than having it in a fuel belt, you can carry it in your hands. And this can obviously impact on your running posture. If you've got a heavy bottle of water in one arm, it can affect the way you run, and it can give you quite bad shoulder pain. So I know that probably sounds a bit dramatic, but it is an absolute issue. And my recommendation would be, if you're not comfortable with a fuel belt, then really be looking at, where can I put water around the course, particularly if you've got like a 2-lap route on your long run. Be thinking about that. Be thinking, right, well, there's a place here I could put a bottle. I'm going to go past it twice. I probably only need 3 of those locations. But it is so important that you think really carefully about the hydration and the gels and anything else that you think you are going to need to take with you. This shouldn't be a lot more. Some people might take a banana with them or something. But obviously, I would be cautious. I would just focus on the water and the gels, and they are messy. So just be prepared for that. These long runs, like I said, are all about having a practice, and you do not want to be taking gels for the first time on race day. It's not a great idea. You need to have practiced. You need to have practiced with a certain brand and get used to that brand. It might not be the same brand that you have on race day. If it isn't, then obviously you'll have to carry them with you, because you don't want to then be reliant on the brand that's supplied by the event. So, just get used to a certain brand, get used to consuming them on the way around. That's what the long run's for. Same with the water. You don't have to worry about that on race day, of course, because all the big races, what majority of races full stop, have water in the right locations. The big ones particularly have medical directors who will work out exactly what hydration you need at what point. So you don't have to take water with you. Some people still do, but you just don't need to. A lot of people will pick up a little water bottle at a water station in the big races and carry them with them on the way around, just as a sort of knowing you've always got it. Some races now are doing open cups of water, though. So just be aware of that and find out in advance what that race has. And it's really important that you then practice with exactly the way that they do it. Okay, so nutrition's absolutely key.
A Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Get into a routine. So develop your routine, and remember that you need to then get used to doing what you're going to do on race day, basically. So I'm talking here about what time, not only the meal, that's part of the routine. What time will you be going to bed the night before the race? Be thinking about that. What time are you going to get up? Be thinking about that as well. So again, practice race day on your long runs. Really important. How long are you going to get up before your race starts? You need to try and get your race day routine in your head and into these long runs as a practice as soon as you possibly can. Now, we all know the 4 principles of training, and one of these principles is gradual progression. It's a bit of an obsession of mine, is making sure that over time we gradually increase the time on feet with each run. And this is especially important with these long runs. Not quite as important as the runs during the week, which, like I said before, are all about building up to the long run. But the long run, we absolutely must do this gradually. So don't be tempted to go from 10 miles to 14 miles or 14 to 18 in one go. That's when you'll get an injury. So what you need to do is to absolutely focus on this bit by bit, moving up through the mileage. So if you're first, this is why you need to leave plenty of time, because you're going to probably have to do 6 or 7 or 8 of these long runs. And it's really important that you've got time in your schedule to be able to do those. So if your first one's 10 miles, your next one should be 11 miles. And then the next one should be 12 miles. It can be very tempting to, when you're on a 10-mile run and you get to the end of it, and you should be able to probably go a little bit further, to then think, oh, God, I feel amazing today. The weather's great. I'm just going to keep going. Don't be tempted to do that. Injury or strike at that point. Just wrap it up and be thinking, well, next week I know I'm fine because I feel good now. I could go a little bit further. That's brilliant. Then you can go a little bit further next time. So just go ever so gradually, bit by bit, every week, just adding a mile or mile and a bit. Just don't go too far. If for some reason you end up missing a week, don't get too upset about that. But don't be tempted just to keep going on the schedule that you were at. So most of us are going to get some kind of injury or illness during the any marathon or half marathon 10K training plan. You just got to accept that, and you just got to have plenty of slack built into your schedule. So if you have a week or 2 weeks in where you miss it, you've just got to live with that and not just try and keep going on the schedule that you were at. So if you were at 10 miles and you then needed to go to 11 and then to 12 and you miss the 11, the following week you do the 11, or you might even go back a notch and go back to the 10. You don't then go straight to the 12, because in effect then you've gone from 10 to 12. So it's ever so gradual, bit by bit. Build this thing up, build this long run thing up. It's so, so important. How far should we ultimately go? Well, like I said at the very beginning, my view was I don't think I've ever run more than 20 miles in a long run. Probably not that often, to be honest. Have I even gone that far? So it depends very much on which race you're doing as to the level of crowd support that are going to drag you through that last 6 miles. And if you're doing something like, one of the big World Marathon major events, then chances are, and not always the case. I ran Boston, and there wasn't a massive amount of crowd support over those last 6 miles. There probably was in the last mile, but not as much as you would think. Chicago, probably the same. London is brilliant. The last 6 miles of London are probably amongst the best 6. So it's pretty much packed all the way in that last 6 miles. Loads of charity cheer zones, etc. So I would say that the crowd will drag you in some races, but don't expect the crowd to drag you through 6 miles in a little small local marathon, because it just won't happen. So you need to be, really followed a training plan very closely. And if you get to 20 miles, then in your training run, then you will finish, and you will finish comfortably. But don't rely on the crowd to help you finish comfortably. They will make a difference. Absolutely, they will. But don't expect them to work miracles. If you get to 18 miles, which is probably quite average for most people for a marathon schedule, or 10 for a half marathon, you're going to do fine. You'll be okay on race day. It's just a little bit harder, and that's the way you got to look at it. The further you can go, some people will go to 22 miles in their training runs for a marathon. I wouldn't recommend that you go much further, but some people feel more comfortable with that, and they want to have the impact on their confidence of going that far, and that's absolutely fine. When you're on the start, like I was, as I said, on that very first marathon, and I'd only done 13 miles, clearly my confidence is not then at a great level, because I knew that once I got to halfway, I was in new territory for me, and that comes with a degree of trepidation and nervousness, and clearly, when you get to 15, 16 miles and you've still got 10 or so to go, and you're feeling bad, what's coming. So the longer you go in your long run, the better for your confidence, the better for your physical state, and ultimately better for how you're gonna feel in those last few miles. One of the important things that I always stick with on all these long runs, and I've done this quite a few times, is to just abort if there's a problem early on. So, even late on, to be honest. Sometimes I've packed up a long run at sort of 10 miles if I was planning a 15, 16 mile run, and it's just not happening. Then I will, on occasions, just go, "Nah, do you know what? It's not great. The weather's rubbish. I don't feel it today. I'm just going to rejig my training plan to do another long run in a few days' time, or I'll just scrap this one and I'll just get back on it again next weekend." So don't be scared about doing that, because it's ultimately these are such important runs, and don't push yourself if it's just not happening for you. That's not to say you just pack up whenever you feel like it, because sometimes you can push through a bad patch and come out the other side of it and actually feel quite good. So don't just take the easy option. But there can be occasions where you're running for 2 or 3 miles and it's just feeling awful, and you're soaking wet, you're freezing cold. At that point, you're probably just packing it up and having another go. So don't be worried about doing that, but obviously you need to change your schedule accordingly. The training plans are absolutely a guide, so don't be beholden to them. Don't be scared of changing them around. The principles, they're built around these 4 principles of training, and this gradual progression thing is so important. If you have that bad run, don't worry about it. If you have a bad run during the week as a build up to your long run, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. Get plenty of rest. This is so important for your marathon training at all stages. And with the long run, you must rest the day before and you must rest the day after. Don't do your long run if you're tired, because you're going to be tired at the end of it. Don't do it tired. So important. So give yourself the Saturday. If your long run's on a Sunday, give yourself Saturday off. Give yourself Monday off. Really important, because then you can start to rebuild for the week ahead. 2 or 3 runs during the week, and then you're back on it again for the following Sunday. Never ever run your long run tired. And basically, the long run builds your race, how you feel on race day. Okay, everything about your training plan is driven by the long run, and the better you perform on your long runs, the better race day is going to be.
And now it's time for Q&A.
Right, so I've got a couple of questions from people about the long run. Jake from Northampton says, have you any particular gels that you recommend? Tricky one. I've probably tried 6 or 7 different brands over the years. I've had some spectacular fails and some successes, but it very much depends on you. My recommendation would absolutely be that you try some out, and you may well find that the very first one you try is fantastic. Some have got caffeine in, for example. Some people swear by that. Others are not keen on caffeine in their gels. So absolutely, I mean, there's loads out there now. They're not cheap. They can range from like £1 to £2 a gel, depending on how many you get in a pack. But I would just try out a few yourself, see how you feel, and take it from there. But if you decide on the brand that's being used by the event, and not all events have gels, of course, only depends, generally only the big ones, and it depends on if they've got a sponsorship deal, because obviously they don't want to be buying thousands of these things. So assume you're going to have to take your own, even if you have the brand that you if you get used to the brand they're going to use during the race, you might want more than they provide during the race, so you might end up taking some anyway. So yeah, just try a few out, see how you feel, and take it from there. And Neil from Glasgow says, what's the furthest I need to run if I'm running a marathon? Well, we've sort of covered that. It very much depends again on how long you've got, how you're feeling, what your aspirations are as well. We didn't cover that earlier, but if you're going for a 3-hour marathon finish time, which for most people is a real aspiration, not necessarily going to happen, because that is really tough, then you would probably need to be doing longer runs during training. You're really going to be pushing hard, but to go with that, you're also going to be doing interval training and hill training and all that kind of stuff. I think if your aspirations are to do a 5-6 hour marathon, you've still got to be doing long runs. Don't get me wrong, because that is still a tough gig. But I'd say the majority of people end up doing 17, 18 miles. If you get to that point, you're going to be comfortable on race day, but you probably won't be pushing super quick times. But that, like I said, that might not be your aspiration, and it all comes down to what we want to achieve on the day. So yeah, just play it by ear. You might just run out of time and only be able to do 17 or 18. If you've got the time, I would push on to 20. But that's 10 weeks worth of long runs if we assume 10 miles is a long run. So you need to have the time available. If you're starting late, if you're starting your schedule reasonably late, then I'd say if you can get to 18, that would be great. Right, well, thanks for listening, everyone. If you've got any more questions on the long run, just please give me a shout via the chat on the site. So it's like I said, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and we're here to help. Give me a shout anytime. All right, cheers.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.